This then is the guidance film for the change in British politics from the 19th century moving towards the present day. So we start off initially with a Guess the Politician quiz. Initially Theresa May, Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition, the Labour Party, Nicola Sturgeon, the leader of the Scottish Nationalist Party, Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister during the Second World War, and Margaret Thatcher, the country's first female Prime Minister. A point for each correct one, an additional point possibly for some context, i.e. their job or when they did whatever it was that they are associated with. So, power and politics, the voting system in 1832. What we'll be looking at in this lesson is what the political system and the government were like before 1832 and how things start to change along with everything else during the 19th century. So initially, what does the government do? Brainstorm. See if the class can come up with a variety of things. See if it can be narrowed down to 5 key points, the most important points. The extension question, why then is it important that you understand the role of the government? Obviously, Britain is a participatory democracy. We're all expected to vote, therefore we are all expected to have opinions. Okay, back then to the theme of power that we've already studied with the feudal system and subsequently with the Civil War. What we are looking at is the trend in British history over the last 1,000 years where power moves from the few at the top to increasingly more and more people. Initially just the king, then the king and the barons after the Magna Carta, and then the king and the lords and the middle classes after the English Civil War. Now in the 19th century, with a massive explosion in Britain's wealth and power, it is the working classes that start to campaign for more and more power. In 1832, more of the middle classes are given the vote, and subsequently later in the 19th century, the working classes. Women will eventually get their right to vote in 1928 after the efforts of the suffragettes, campaigning for women's rights, and subsequently the impact of World War I. So, if the English Civil War brought to a conclusion the argument over who should rule the country, it would no longer be kings and queens, but Parliament. Monarchs would still remain, but their power would be very limited, as the Queen's is today. Yet if Britain was experiencing a great period of change in every other respect, known as the Industrial Revolution, isn't it inevitable that the way in which Britain would require governing would change as well? So we can initially start off by asking people in the class, if these two scenes are so different, how might it impact on the way in which Britain needs to be governed? The obvious one would be more people, therefore the systems need to change. The government clearly has more to do in this picture than it did in this picture. So that can be speculative. Information then on what was wrong with the system before the 1900s. And some more information, depending upon the ability of the class to move. And again, the 1832 Act, which gave the middle classes the vote, the Second Reform 1867, which gave more working class merit. And then only in 1872 was the secret ballot established, where people voted in private. Here we then have an understanding of how our country is governed today, based upon the notions of constituencies, roughly made up of around 60,000 people in each of these areas. So obviously where the smaller constituencies are, these are the more urban areas. All right, the areas that developed rapidly after the Industrial Revolution. So London, the cities of the Midlands, and the North East, Glasgow and Edinburgh. So, using the A5 slip that the students are provided with, pick out the facts that are wrong with the system prior to 1832. Okay, so read the article, highlight these points. This can then be used possibly as a key for a later activity. Brainstorm the key facts around. And then moving on, what we're now going to do is complete a second sheet based upon the Blackadder episode Dish and Dishonesty, collecting information about what was wrong with the British electoral system back in the 18th, 19th centuries. What we can then do is complete that A4 sheet and use this sheet as a key to then colour code the A4 sheet, identifying what was wrong with Britain at the time. So, using that previous slip to then colour code the examples on this sheet once we've completed filling it out. So that can be done as an extension task.